Hey guys, before this video starts, I want to give a big thank you to ZakBabyTV for helping out. If you're not familiar with his channel, be sure to check him out. He's got a lot of dope content over there, including a collaboration we did together, so yeah, links to his channel and our video will be in the description. As always, I hope you're doing well, and I hope you enjoy. If anyone has ever driven in Alabama, then you know it can be a creepy state to drive through. I'm not sure where to start. I've had a few experiences with the paranormal, which I plan to post here as I find the time, but this is my only cryptid experience. I'm not sure what we witnessed, but we got a good look at it in broad daylight. This sighting happened just before noon. My girlfriend and I had some time off work, so we decided on a much needed getaway for a long weekend. This was early 2019, late January or early February, so it was pretty darn cold. That being said, if you know anything about the southern USA, it doesn't get that cold. This was just one of those rare days when it was 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm just trying to compile all the events surrounding the sighting, so bear with me here. We were on a highway in a swampy area. I have no idea the exact location, but I can say it was southern Alabama and close to Mississippi. There were lots of bridges. I wish we could have gotten pics, but the car was moving around 60 miles per hour when it happened. My girlfriend cries out for me to look, and I turn my head to get a glimpse of a grotesque looking creature. This thing was hunched down on all fours, possibly eating something. This all happened so fast, but I slow down and get a better look. All of a sudden, the thing stands on two legs and has a humanoid figure, all except the head. The head was goat-like, but it had the body of a man. There were horns, and overall, the head resembled that of a light-colored goat. The creature started back toward the woods, and we continued with our trip, but we couldn't stop talking about what we had just witnessed. I cannot be 100% sure of what we saw. This all happened so fast. My girlfriend swears it was a man with a goat head, and I'm certain that I saw the same thing. If anyone has any insight into cryptids of this type, or a similar sighting, I'd be glad to hear.
This happened to me when I was a kid, back in the late 1990s. I was either 8 or 9 years old to be exact. I was with my family camping at some national forest campgrounds. It was called the Mohican Memorial State Forest. It kind of reminds me of that movie, The Last of the Mohicans. I totally felt like that white Indian that was totally kicking butt. At least, that's what me and my brothers were pretending to play when we were out there camping. It was just me and my 2 other brothers. We were walking around the main street where people were coming in and out of the campgrounds. There was a small bike lane section on the side of each side of the road, which we used as we all walked in front of one another. I'm not sure exactly where this was, but there was this wooden bridge overpass that went over some river. To give you a better visual, it was like a dark brown barn, that it was a bridge that had asphalt that was like part of the road. Looking back now, it kind of reminded me of the beginning part of the movie from Beetlejuice, where the family actually dives off of that bridge road. It was like that. Anyways, so we're walking near this wooden barn-looking bridge thing. Remember, I was like 8 years old. I'm just going off of memory. As we started to walk our way inside, we could feel the dampness all around us. It was obvious that it had rained prior to our arrival, as we could hear the slow, dripping noises of the water from above. It was a good thing that it was daylight, because if we were walking through that old wooden bridge at night and hearing those dripping noises, it definitely would have scared the crap out of me. I remember this was sometime in summer. It was pretty hot out, and we expected to see a lot more kids to play with and to intermingle with. But for some reason, the park was pretty much empty. I remember seeing only a couple other spaces that were even occupied when we first arrived. Once we made it about halfway into this old creepy bridge thing, we turned to face the water outside, looking down below, gasping as to what we had seen and witnessed. Usually, you would see a couple people maybe on canoes, or one of those inner tube floaties, or people just swimming. But that's not what we saw. Not at all. What we saw, at first we thought was just a large dog swimming towards the edge on the right-hand side of the river canal. But as we watched a little longer, we noticed that it wasn't a dog. It was more like a man, covered in fur, bulkier and much larger than our father. But it had the head of a wolf. This thing was really big, bigger than anything I've ever seen before in person. Yet its legs were pretty scrawny compared to its upper torso. None of us could speak, and none of us could move. All we did was stood there in silence and watched as this thing slowly made its way to the right-hand side edge of the river. We could see it walking on all fours at first. Once it fully got out of the water, it stopped. We could see it sniffing in the air like it had scent of something or someone. Then, drenched in river water, this thing hops on its back legs and stands up straight like a man, and shakes its fur like a dog. Its posture was way too man-like. It didn't hop back down on all fours. This thing darted off in the woods on its back legs, running at full sprint like a man, disappearing into the brush. That's really all I could remember. Again, I was young, but still, I saw that dog guy, whatever you want to call it. We were so scared, we didn't even really talk about it until after we had gotten back to camp to try to explain to our parents what we had seen. They didn't believe us. They just told us that we probably saw some coyotes or wolves, and that it was just our imaginations. But please explain to me how my brothers have the same story as I. It wasn't just my imagination. We all three saw it.
I live in rural southern Nevada. A buddy of mine and I encountered what we decided to be a skinwalker one night while we were sharing a bottle of whiskey. It was late. I was living toward the edge of town, fairly close to the open desert. I don't remember the time. I'd estimate between 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. My buddy comes over and decides to spend the night drinking and hanging out with me. We were in the living room, sitting near the side of the house, right next to a couple closed and blinded windows. We'd been on the topic of the paranormal and cryptids when we began discussing Skinwalker lore. We're about an hour in on that topic, and about a quarter into the fifth I had, swimmy but not quite drunk, when we began hearing a faint but distinguishable pitter-patter directly outside the window, pacing back and forth the length of the side of the house. We were buzzing enough to semi-dismiss it until we began to hear hyena-esque cackling. At that point, we figured that we had attracted one to us by speaking of them, which is a staple of their lore. So we decided the best course would be to not acknowledge it and carry on with our conversation until it left. The paw-like pacing and cackling continued for another 45 minutes or so, and eventually stopped. Neither one of us were willing to open the blinds or go outside until the morning. But when we woke up and went outside, not only did we see dog prints lining the dirt directly outside of the windows, we saw a set of abnormally large human-like footprints that ran from near the carport to the center of the yard before the track stopped dead, and each footprint was smaller and less imprinted. To this day, we're positive that we attracted or summoned a Skinwalker. Even if that's not the correct cryptid, I know for a fact that there was something outside of the house that night.
This happened to me back in the early 2000s when I was in middle school, 7th grade to be exact. We were camping at the Table Rock State Park over by the Table Rock Lake. It was a usual gathering for our family. Every year we all got together and we went camping out there by the lake. The lake is located in Branson, Missouri. It really was a beautiful place to go camping. The woods were thick, and the lake was cold. It was awesome. People would go out there on their boats. People went canoeing, swimming, fishing. It's just awesome. I have some of the best memories of my life being at that campground with my family. Until that summer. That summer where I had the worst memory ever, the one that keeps haunting my dreams. My family would always set up a 4-day camping expedition which included the weekends so they wouldn't have to miss too much time off of work. So we would arrive on a Friday and leave on Monday. I remember the first night we were there, everybody unpacked, set up the tents, set up the food, the ice chest, put all the hors d'oeuvres and all the things that they were going to prep for that evening's dinner on the picnic table, and got the fire ready for that evening before it got dark. We didn't do any fishing or swimming or canoeing that first day, mostly just relaxing and running around in the woods. The second night is when we were hearing whatever it was outside of our tent. It was Saturday night, if I could remember correctly, and we started hearing these heavy footstep vibrations somewhere outside of our camping location, but it definitely sounded like it was close to us. I could still feel it. I mean, after the first one, that definitely woke me up. After the other footsteps came, everybody else was pretty much wide awake at that moment, including my parents. We just all laid there in total fright with our eyes completely wide open, waiting to anticipate what it was, what was out there, and what would it do, and what did it want? So many questions were running through my head at the same time I couldn't even clearly think correctly. I felt like my whole body was completely frozen. I couldn't even move a muscle. I just laid there and listened. Then, when the footsteps stopped, we didn't know what to think. Did the creature go away? Was it a bear? Was it something else? I pretty much had my answer when we all heard the noise. Whatever it was outside was still there. It had not left. In fact, it was definitely making its presence known. The question is, what the heck was it? It was no bear, and it was no coyote. What was this thing outside of our tent? My head was located right where the zipper ended by the front of the tent. I was dying for a peek. I couldn't help it. I was a 12-year-old boy. I only opened it a couple inches. I swear, I just wanted a peek. What I saw outside of that small slit, what I saw outside of that zipper will forever haunt me. I saw this huge, man-like wolf just standing upwards, digging through all of our things outside on the dirt. It was covered in head to toe in dark black, shiny fur. It might not have been shiny, but it definitely reflected off of the moonlight above. I got a glimpse of its face once from the side. It was only for a split second, but it was enough for me to see its glowing eye. Its glowing amber eye. My dad was holding an air horn in his hand and holding it upwards towards the sky. I don't know what scared me worse. That thing outside, or not having a warning when my dad just let loose of that air horn inside the tent with all of us. The second I looked back outside of that zipper, that thing was gone. It must have darted off into the woods. That air horn must have frightened the crap out of it. Hell, it scared the crap out of us. I don't think any of us moved for the next 15 minutes. We were just too frightened to go outside. Especially after what I explained to them what I had seen. Typically, they would have never believed what I had seen, but for the fact that they heard that thing outside and the vibrations of the footsteps, I think they believed what I had seen. I just wish I had some kind of proof.
This happened about a month ago in Champaign, Illinois. I live in a neighborhood in town, a few blocks away from main city streets, around Madison University, if you're familiar with the area. I was in the front yard doing some yard work. The west side of the yard is lined with tall evergreens, but they are sparse enough to see through to the lot next to me and the house on the other side of the lot. I paused from working and noticed some movement through the trees, an animal running or trotting from the back of the lot to the street. I decided to watch it, just in case it was the dog from the house on the other side of the lot, and it needed to be returned to the owner. When the animal entered the street, my immediate thought was that it was a baby deer. It ran like a deer and was about that size. But then I realized it wasn't a deer. Its body looked more like a dog, like a greyhound or whippet. It really looked like a cross between a deer and dog, but looked like neither. It just didn't look right. It was a solid tan color, no spots or markings, and it had a long slender tail, muzzle or snout, and body. I believe it also had long ears that it held back against its head. It made absolutely no sound as it ran, and only looked straight ahead as it crossed the street into the overgrown backyard of an abandoned house. I only saw it for a few seconds, but I got a pretty good look at it. I know it could have been a dog, but it just didn't move like a dog. My husband thinks it may have been some sort of cryptid. We're tempted to explore the abandoned house to see what we can find out.
This happened to me when I was in high school back in the 1980s. Yeah, I'm kinda old, but whatever, right? I live in central Illinois, in the middle of nowhere to be in fact, but that's the way I was raised. We didn't have a farm, but we did own quite a few acres. The nearest school was at least a 15, maybe a 20-minute drive away. The school buses didn't come to my area, so we were left with finding a way to get me to school and back. Typically, my mother would take me, but once I got older, of course, I would use my bike. I didn't have a car until I was in my senior year, and this happened to me when I was a sophomore. It was just a few days before summer break. I was riding my bike home, well, in home's direction, with a couple others that kind of live in the area where I live. There wasn't too many kids in our neighborhood. Heck, there wasn't too many people in our area. I decided to go over to my buddy's house after school because it was Friday and it's not like I had to rush to go home to do my homework or anything, and we wanted to hang out and play some video games. Back then, we only had the Atari, and the Nintendo had just came out. Unfortunately, I didn't have either because we were pretty poor. Fast forward about 45 minutes or so, we're just arriving at his house, and his mom actually had some of those Pizza Hot Pockets already ready to go for our arrival. It's like she knew I was coming. I joked to my friend. I must have been using the Force. We both just giggled, walking inside the kitchen, grabbing the paper plates, and walking towards his bedroom. We were both just taking turns playing The Legend of Zelda on NES. That was like our favorite game. Sure, we played Mario Brothers and some other stuff like that, but Zelda was our shiznit. I remember hearing his phone ring inside the kitchen of his house. I dreaded the thought it was my mom. And by golly, it was. His mom knocked on his door and leaned her head inside. "Timmy, your mom says you need to get home for dinner." How did she even know I was over here? Dang. Alright, dude, I gotta go. I'll see you tomorrow. Either two things were gonna happen. One, I was gonna go home and have dinner, and probably just go to sleep or watch some TV with my pa. Or two, I was gonna get beat for not being home and not letting them know that I was over at my buddy's house. Probably number two was gonna happen, so I had to mentally get prepared for it. After finishing my Pepsi, I threw everything in the kitchen trash, grabbed my backpack by the front door, and went outside to the porch where my bike was. After about 5 minutes worth of riding, I started having this weird, eerie feeling that I was being followed or watched. I don't know what gave me this feeling. We were just playing Zelda, so for some reason I was just having that weird feeling in my gut, and it was driving me nuts. I was starting to become a little paranoid. I kept glancing from my left and my right and constantly looking behind me to see if anything was following me or anyone was following me. Was there some stalker on a car, or was there some type of animal, or something was wrong and I just couldn't pinpoint why I was feeling this way. I was probably only a few blocks away from my house at this point when I started hearing the howls somewhere off in the distance. It echoed everywhere. Okay, that's it. I started pedaling as fast as I could. I just knew something was wrong. I've never heard that before where we live. That's like something out of the movies. I pedaled, and I pedaled. I took a quick glimpse behind me. And that's when I saw this thing running up from behind me. It was probably about 20 meters or so back. It was running on the side outskirts of the road trail that I was on. It was large, running like a man but hunched over. It was definitely taller than I was. It had the face of a canine dog. It was full of fur, long sharp claws. Its arms looked longer than they should have been. But it was definitely some kind of dog. But it wasn't running like a dog. It was some kind of dog guy. I don't know. I got a quick glimpse of it. I got about 2 seconds of it, and then I quickly turned around so I wouldn't lose focus of where I was going on my bike. I put pedal to the metal as fast as I could on my bike. I knew this thing was gaining on me. Whatever it was fast. I could see my house up ahead. I could see the porch light on. I knew I could make it. I was so close. Just a little bit longer, I kept telling myself over and over and over in my head to try to keep my sanity. Right before I was about to hop off my bike and run up my front door steps, I took one quick glance behind me just in case. The thing was gone. It wasn't chasing me anymore. I still hopped off my bike and ran up those stairs like it was an Olympic contest or something. I darted inside and locked the door behind me, completely out of breath. I never went to my friend's house after dark since.
Hey everyone. About 2 weeks ago, I had a really scary experience, and my husband didn't believe me. But last night, he had a very similar experience, and now we're both wondering what we could have possibly seen. My experience. Our puppy was barking to go outside to use the bathroom. It was about 4 or 5 a.m. I took him out back and stood on the steps of our deck because I didn't want to get my feet wet. My dog was using the bathroom when I looked up and saw something across the yard. It was slowly walking toward me, like one step at a time, and its eyes were super reflective of my phone's flashlight. I thought it was a deer, but its eyes were so tall and staring straight at me, and it wasn't running away, but walking slowly closer. I hurried the dog up, and we ran inside. I have recurring night terrors, so, at first, my husband thought it was just that. But I was crying and shaking, and could barely talk about it. He told me it was probably a deer, but I wasn't convinced. I refused to take the dog out after midnight. His experience. Early this morning, around 5 a.m., the dog was barking and he took him outside. Once again, my husband stood on the deck stairs. He didn't have his glasses, but he said when he looked up, he saw something tall standing in the forested part of our backyard. He said he saw it walking slowly, like it was almost gliding. And he said, as soon as he noticed it, he got a nosebleed. My husband is typically prone to nosebleeds, but hasn't had one since the season changed. He said he wanted to get a closer look, but felt like he needed to go inside instead, like an instinct, so he ran in. My husband is a zookeeper, and he isn't really afraid of animals. He works with giraffes and elephants, and says that this creature was definitely bigger than a deer. We've been trying to search what else it could be, but are coming up with nothing.
When I was 15, was the last time that I went camping with my family. Or went camping, period, for that matter. This happened a few years back, as I'm now 20. But I remember it like it had just happened. At the end of this, you might tell me that I'm crazy, delusional, or simply just making it up. But be sure this is 100% true. And it wasn't just me. It was my little sister too. It was my sister and I and our parents. We were camping over at the Spruce Knob Lake campgrounds, right next to the Spruce Knob Lake, located in West Virginia. We've been there before as a family, but my parents like to try out different places around the area and the state. Our state isn't fairly large, so it's not that much of a drive to get around. This last camping trip was by far the most awkward and deranged experience I had ever encountered, and it will be my last. It was in the month of May. The snow was basically cleared, and it was green everywhere around us. It was quite beautiful, to be frank. We were going to stay there throughout the weekend, as my parents had taken that Friday off of work. Once we arrived, we parked at the assigned spot to which they had reserved. I remember helping my father unload the back of the truck as my little sister helped my mom gather the things on the picnic table. We had gotten there a little later than I think my parents wanted to arrive. Immediately, after everything was unloaded, they started to prepare a quick lunch. Fast forward through lunch. Me and my sister wanted to go on a quick little hike just around the area. The last time we had been there, we didn't do much exploring, so we definitely wanted to take advantage of it, as my parents just wanted to sit back and lounge around the space. I remember we wanted to head south towards that lake. I wanted to check it out and see if anybody else was actually fishing down there. I want to say about 15, maybe 20 minutes later, we were approaching the lake. It was so nice outside. The campgrounds were pretty packed, but there were still some open spots, so it wasn't overcrowded or anything by any means. We just hung out by the lake for a little while, and then just started following the water line around the lake, just out of pure boredom, to be in all honesty. I could hear some people partying off in the distance, and then I heard people from on the other side of the lake shooting off fireworks. I don't know why, it wasn't the 4th of July or anything. I didn't pay it any mind, I just figured it was other families just having fun with their families. When we started to make our way back around the lake and head back north towards our camping site, that's when things got a little weird. We started walking through the woods in the direction that I remembered from earlier. We started hearing the noises of snapping twigs and branches coming from behind us, then to our left. It was weird. I couldn't pinpoint where these noises were coming from, but they were definitely somewhere nearby us. Then, already spooked, something or someone was talking to us.
Hey kids, I'm over here. I twisted my ankle and I can't get up. Can you please come over here and help me out? I'm just over here. Follow my voice.
We both stopped in our tracks. Was there another kid that was hurt? I asked my sister. She didn't reply, but she definitely looked puzzled. It sounded like a kid. A young boy, in fact. But it didn't. There was something really weird about his voice, even though it sounded like a child. I was just about ready to turn off into the woods to help whoever that was asking for help, as I could tell it was coming from our left. But my sister grabbed onto my arm and said, "Don't." I stopped. I thought about it for a second, and then I remember telling her, "All right, we'll just get back to our parents and maybe they could ask someone for help." So we started walking back towards our campsite once again. Then, somewhere off behind us in the distance, we heard that kid or thing cry out to us.
Hey, where are you guys going? I'm back here. Please stop and help me.
That was it. That last sentence just scared the bejeebies out of me and my sister. We both held hands and floored it as fast as we could through the woods back to our camping site to our parents. I can't believe it. We actually made it back there without stopping. I was completely out of breath, and so was my sister by the time we had got to our spot. I remember when we had first arrived back to our camping site, we were completely freaked out. I think we weren't even making any sense to our parents. Eventually, I remember they calmed us down and sat us down at the picnic table and spoke to us individually. I explained everything to my dad, and my sister did too, along with my mother. They told us it was probably some other kids or maybe somebody just playing a prank on us. They said, just stay around here for the remainder of the trip. Don't go wandering off somewhere, especially down there by the lake. It's too far off. We did as we were told, enjoyed the rest of our camping trip with our parents, staying within sight of our campsite. We never ventured off down south to that lake. But I know for one thing, and so does my sister, even though we were younger, that wasn't kids pranking us. And I swear to you, I'll never go camping ever again.
Back in the early 1990s, I was a kid, around 13 at the time of this incident, and I used to stay at my grandparents' house a lot, out in a rural area in southeastern Arkansas. When I say very rural, I mean that it was a series of networked dirt roads to get out to their house. The closest neighbors besides my aunt and uncle, who lived about a quarter of a mile up the road, were over a mile and a half away. The closest town was a 10-mile trip. It's in the middle of farmland and mostly woods. They had lived in this house since my mother was a child, and had both grown up just a ways down the road. Anyway, there was a general store, roughly 3 to 4 miles down the network of dirt roads. This was your typical country general store, ran by an old lady and her husband, and its only customers really only consisted of the people who lived out there in bumfuck Egypt. One day, my grandmother asked me if I wanted to walk to the general store and get her some milk, eggs, and a few other miscellaneous items, and I told her I would. She gave me some money, and I headed on my way. It was fairly early in the day, and I had plenty of time to get back before dark, which I always made sure to do when I was out roaming about. Things can get mighty creepy out in the backwoods of Arkansas after nightfall. It's a darkness unlike most people who have lived primarily in cities or towns have ever experienced. Me, being a 13-year-old, had poor time management skills. I stopped at the bottom of a hill next to a small wooden bridge you have to cross and messed around at the creek catching crawdads and such. And I kinda just messed around the whole way to the store. By the time I left the store, I realized it was quickly approaching dark. This was fall, and darkness set upon the land pretty early in the day. I didn't want to be walking those lonely, secluded roads through the woods, alone in the dark, so I hurried as fast as I could, running and sprinting as much as possible. But it wasn't enough. By the time I had made it back to the bottom of the hill near the bridge, it was almost completely dark, and there was an eerie sort of glow, brought about by a very bright, nearly full moon that was rising. At the top of the hill, the road was perfectly straight and flat, with woods on the left side and a large field on the right. About a half-mile up from the top of the hill is my grandparents' house, and you can see it from there. As I top the hill, I can see the faint glow of the lights at their house, and I feel a sense of relief because I was kind of freaking out a little bit, but knowing I was so close and could see the house offered a little bit of comfort. The field on the right was somewhat illuminated by the glow of the moon, and my eyes had adjusted to the darkness rather well at this point. As I walked up the road, I hear something from the left, behind me on the wooded side of the road. It sounded like leaves being rustled. I turned to look, and I saw nothing at first, but then, as my eyes began to focus, I see something in the ditch. A black shadowy shape slowly moves toward me. At first, I thought it was a dog, but then I realized it was much too large to be a dog. And then I realized it wasn't actually walking on 4 legs. It was crawling, like a person would. I stared for a moment, out of sheer confusement, trying to figure out what I was seeing. And then, a jolt of fear shot through me as it dawned on me that whatever this thing was, it had been trying to sneak up on me. At that exact moment, this thing stood upright out of the ditch on two legs, like a person. It had the shape of a human, long arms, legs, and was proportioned as such. It stood roughly 7 to 8 feet in height, and was completely covered in a black or maybe dark brown hair. Its face was dark in color, but I can't recall seeing much in the way of features due to it being night. It was no bear for certain, or any other kind of animal I had ever seen for that matter. I immediately dropped the bag of stuff I'd been carrying and bolted as fast as my legs could take me toward my grandparents' house. I heard a heavy breathing, guttural growling kind of sound behind me, and I heard this thing's footsteps running behind me on the gravel as it gave chase. I didn't turn around and was certain that it would grab me at any moment. I then heard it crash off into the woods and let out an earth-shattering and ungodly scream, unlike anything I'd ever heard before or since. I'm positive this thing could have easily caught me had it wanted to, but for some reason, it let me go. By the time I reached my grandparents, my heart felt as if it would explode from the combination of the adrenaline rush I had from being scared beyond any type of fear I'd ever felt before or since, and full-on sprinting as hard and fast as possible for about a straight half-mile. I flew into the house and in an incoherent mess of hyperactive gibberish tried to explain to my grandparents what had just happened. My grandmother didn't really seem to believe me, but did believe something had scared me and acted rather weird about the whole thing. She tried to convince me it was just a dog or some other animal. The next morning, I woke up and found my grandpa sitting outside, whittling wood underneath the shade tree in the front yard, as he often liked to do. I went and sat down beside him in one of the old metal lawn chairs. He was a very rational man, down to earth, and had grown up and hunted that area his entire life. He knew every square inch of it, mapped into his mind. He knew every type of critter and creature that lived in those woods, what noise they made, where to find them, how to catch them, etc. I had only been hunting with him for a couple of years, but had been going out into those woods with him since a pretty young age on walks and such. He had passed a lot of his knowledge down to me during those adventures. I spoke to him about what had happened to me the night before, and told him that I knew what I saw. It wasn't my overactive imagination, I wasn't making it up, and it definitely wasn't a dog. He knew that I wasn't just some dumb 13-year-old kid, and he knew that I knew the things he had taught me. He stopped whittling, looked me right in the eyes and said, "I know what you saw. I've seen it before too. There's things out in them woods that people don't understand, and that a person ought not go fooling with." I remember those words clearly to this day, because it gave me affirmation, but at the same time, it made me realize whatever I'd seen was very real in existence, and beyond my understanding. My grandpa then went on to tell me that far back in the woods, there are some cliffs, and at the bottom of those cliffs is a cave. He told me that the cave is where the creature lived. He had once stumbled upon it a long time ago when he was hunting. He said he was standing on top of the cliff looking at it, and when a creature fitting the same description emerged, and began screaming wildly at him and throwing rocks. He said he took a shot at it, missed, and then this thing gave chase to him. But my grandpa was on top of the cliff, so in order to get to him, this thing had to go around a pretty good distance and then up, which he said it quickly began to do, so he hightailed it out of there in a hurry. He said the whole way back home, he felt as if he were being watched, and kept hearing twigs snap behind him, and he was certain that it was following him, stalking him. He made it home, and as he reached his front porch, he turned and looked back at the woods from where he came, and saw it peeking out at him from behind a tree. Later that night, he said that he and my grandmother awoke in the early morning hours to large rocks being thrown at the house, and ungodly howling noises from outside, and this thing trying to get into the house. He said he could hear it walking around on the front porch, rattling the doorknobs, banging on windows, and it sounded like it was muttering to itself in a low, deep, garbled voice, but it didn't sound like a language, just a bunch of gibberish. After a while, the thing went back to throwing some more rocks and howling, so my grandpa grabbed his shotgun and fired it out the front door a few times into the darkness in the direction of the howling, and said he heard it run back into the woods. He didn't know if he did it or not. He said that was the last he'd ever seen or heard from it, but over the years, an occasional farmer's cow would be mutilated, or someone's hunting dog would go unexplainably missing, or someone would have a story about some strange creature they'd seen. He also said it scared my grandmother beyond words, and she absolutely has refused to ever talk about it, or even acknowledge that it happened, which explains her acting weird about it when I told her what happened to me. I know it's a pretty far-fetched story, and you can believe it or not. It makes no difference to me. I know what I saw, and my grandpa knew what he saw, and neither of us have ever felt the need to convince anyone else of it. In fact, until today, I have never actually spoken of it to anyone other than my grandpa, and he passed away roughly 10 years ago.
Last year, July to be in fact, I was camping with my family in Arkansas, the northwest area by Fayetteville to be exact. We had just moved to this area from out of state a couple years prior to this incident. This state is awesome. Outside of some crazy weather, it's absolutely gorgeous and perfectly green in every direction that you look in. I know that's normal to a lot of people that are used to being in the South and parts of the East Coast, but coming from the West Coast, it's really something new. We have this awesome RV. It's not brand new or anything, but it's really big. We were staying over at the Southgate RV Park on South School Avenue in Fayetteville. The first night was as normal as any other night camping in an RV, of course. We arrived, we set up, we ate, we hiked, we sang songs and told ghost stories around the fire and then casually went to bed. It was on the second night, though. That's when things got weird. The morning was normal. The afternoon was normal. That evening, though, on the second night, that's when I decided to venture off on my own for a couple of hours and just hike around the area. There's no major mountains or anything of the sort, but there's some definite deep wooded areas that I was dying to explore, and my parents didn't want to go, so I went by myself and just told them I would be back in a couple of hours, and they were totally cool with it. You know, I won't lie. I have no idea what direction that I went to from the spot that they had reserved. It would have been north, south, east, west, heck, I don't remember. I just went in one direction and just was enjoying the night. It wasn't super late. It was right after dinner time. I want to say the first hour or so, I was enjoying myself. Being one with nature was something that I was really getting used to and really enjoying it. Being a city boy, it was just something that I never really got to experience being in California. But now that I was in the South, it opened my eyes to a lot of other things, including the beauty of nature. Eventually, I feared of getting lost, and I turned around and started heading back in the direction from whence I came. I didn't want to be out too late, and it was already getting dark. I wasn't a wuss or anything, I just wanted to get back because, heck, I don't know my way around that well. And I swear to you, as I was making my way back towards the camping area, I started hearing these weird noises all around me. At least, it started off as noises. And then I heard something speak to me. I stopped in my tracks. What was that? I see what? I got goosebumps all over my body. Dazed and confused, I took off running as quickly as possible.
Where are you going? Slow down. Come back. I want to show you something.
But slow down, I did not. That just fueled the fire to my adrenaline, and I ran as quickly as I could. Eventually, after a good few minutes, I suppose, I made it back out of the woodline and on to the camping resort. Frantic and panicking, I finally made it back over to our space. I attempted to explain everything to my parents. They listened, but they just believed it was some hobo or just someone out in the woods just messing with me. There was just something about the way it spoke and how it sounded that was very unearthly.